Hi, I'm Dave Jaffe with the Dell Solution Centers. I'm here today to talk to you about the DVD Store Database Test Program. The DVD Store, a simulation of an online e-commerce site, was developed by myself and Todd Muirhead, now at VMware, and has been used over the years by Dell, VMware, and other companies for performance testing of databases, web servers, storage, and other components. The DVD Store is a complete kit including test data, build scripts, and database code for SQL Server, Oracle, and MySQL, as well as web applications and a driver program. It's been open sourced and it's available for anyone to use at linux.dell.com/dvdstore. In this demo, we will install a small SQL Server DVD Store database and drive it from a second system. Alright, let's jump in. First, let's go to that website, linux.dell.com/dvdstore. And you can see from the short write-up we have here that we are at version 2.1. Recently, VMware put some major work into the program, which we'll talk about later on, and they've included it in their VM Mark II benchmark. Looking down at the code that's available, this is organized into basically 4 different tarballs. The main tarball is called ds21.tar.gz. You will need that for any of the database implementations. On top of that, we have separate tarballs for the 3 databases, MySQL, Oracle, and SQL Server. You can download any combination of these. They all work together. They all use the same data. These SIGN files, by the way, are PGP signatures that you can validate the tarballs if you wish. Let's go ahead and download the main tarball, ds21.tar.gz. I'm going to save it to my C: drive, and I'll explain that in a minute. Okay, that's complete. Let's step over here and take a look at the C: drive. There it is, the one I just downloaded. I use WinZip to unzip these. There's a lot of different tools you can use. Let's just say extract to here. It's asking me, should WinZip decompress this one file? Yes. And you always get this error message about trailing garbage in the gzip file. So say OK. And when it's done, there'll be a new directory, ds2, and you can see it's got data files. The base DVD Store kit contains the data files for the small DVD Store database, and I'll talk about that in a minute. It contains driver programs for the web version, and it contains a number of general purpose documentation and other files, which we'll talk about later. Now let's go back up, and in this case we want the SQL Server tarball. So let's go ahead and grab that. And we're going to save that to the same spot, C:. That's complete. And we're going to unzip that. There it is. We're going to unzip that to the same place, extract to here. So that's going to basically overlay its contents over on top of the previous DS2 directory that was created by the first tarball. So now, as you can see, it's added a SQL Server DS2 directory. We'll drill down to that later on. If I go ahead then and do the Oracle and the MySQL, I'll see similar directories. Let's take a look at one file here before we can jump into it. The ds2 readme.txt. This basically tells the overview of the entire kit. One thing I wanted to show you in here, the ds2 comes in 3 standard sizes. In other words, we've got code for those 3 sizes. One of the things that VMware has added to this program is the ability to generate databases of any size, but the 3 main sizes are, we call them small, medium, and large. They're roughly 10 megabytes for the small, 1 gigabyte for the medium, and 100 gigabytes for the large. You can see the number of customers and orders and product scales, so that the large contains 200 million customers, basically 100 million in the US and 100 million in the rest of the world, has 10 million orders a month and 1,000 products. The products, by the way, are DVDs. We'll show you some of that later on. Um, Also on the bottom here, as you can see, our email addresses if you need to reach us. Let's take a look at the drivers. I'm going to put this away. Inside the drivers, first of all, you will see a README. There's READMEs in just about every file, every directory. You should always take a look at those when you're trying out some new code. There's also a nice document that documents some of the features of the driver. But basically, in this directory are two things I wanted to point out. One is basically the web driver, and that's used with all the different three-tiered implementations we have here. We've got web applications with PHP, ASP.NET, and JSP, and this web driver will drive all of them. And then for the databases, we use what's called an X driver, and this will be compiled with the database-specific code to generate the driver for that particular program. So for example, for SQL Server, there's a DS2 SQL Server driver.exe that serves as the driver program for SQL Server databases. So the things like the SQL Server driver and the Oracle driver, those are direct drivers that directly drive the database, put a load on the database, simulating users logging in and or creating new users, browsing for DVDs, and then ordering DVDs. Those work directly against the databases without the need for a middle tier, making it very easy to put a load on a server or storage or whatever you're using this for. Let's look at data files. Again, back in the DS2 directory, there's this data files directory. Again, a nice little README there, but we can see for customers, products, and orders, each of these directories contains code to generate the data. And in this case, it also contains code for the small or 10 megabyte database. But if you wanted to generate the other sizes or your own custom sizes, you could use these programs. There's a C program which we've compiled for Windows, although we recommend you do this on Linux. It's got better randomization usually. And then there's shell programs to create the medium, small, medium, and large data sets. So the same data is used for all three databases. Okay, so we've covered the overview of the DVD store. Let's drill down a little bit into the database code. Again, using SQL Server as an example, and you'll see the same things for both Oracle and MySQL. Every directory, every database has a build directory, and you can see a variety of create scripts for the database, stored procedures, indexes, cleanup scripts, as well as a nice README. You'll see the same kind of thing for the other databases. In the other directories, you'll see load scripts for loading the data. Again, they all use the same data, but they've got to have different types of load scripts depending on the database to load the data into the database. And finally, they have different types of web programs. So for example, SQL Server has an ASP.NET page, and here are the actual components that implement the various functions. For example, new customer, login, browse, purchase. And we'll drill into some of those web applications in a later video. Alright, let's actually go ahead and install the SQL Server DVD Store database. Now we've already gone ahead and installed SQL, with the only thing that's sort of not default in our installation was that we included full text search when we installed SQL. There's one other thing I want to show you that will simplify things, not required, but it might help out to take the SA, the system administrator password, make it blank, which is what our driver program assumes. You can modify the driver program to put in any password. I just want to show you one thing with SQL Server. We're using SQL Server 2008, and the way you make the SA password blank is when you install it, you have to give it a password. But then you can come in here, and basically we're going to unenforce the password policy, and that'll enable us to make the password for SA blank. So that's just something you can do and it's giving me a warning as security risk. Yes, I do want to continue. That's just one thing you can do to make your life easier. But certainly, you can set this however you want. The other thing I didn't mention before, I should have mentioned, was that by putting everything under DS2 on the C drive, all of the load programs are designed to find the data files in that location, C: data files, C: DS2 data files, etc. So all the load scripts are set for that. Now you can put this wherever you want. You'll have to modify some scripts. It's not hard. But if you, for the first time through, we sort of recommend you put everything in their default locations, get it running, and then go modify to your heart's content. All right, so we've got, we're on the database machine. We've got SQL Server already installed. What we're going to do is run one single script, which is basically going to do everything for us. And if I go into the SQL Server DS2 directory and look at the README, I'm basically going to show you what we're going to do. If you wanted to do this by hand, you could do these all separately. Basically, the steps are creating a small database, that is by setting up the locations and all that, loading the customers, loading the orders, loading the order lines, customer history, products, inventory, creating indices, creating the stored procedures, and then creating the user. We can do all these in one straight shot with one single script that we have. First thing to know, again, for the simplest installation, we're going to put all the data in a directory on the local machine C drive called C: SQL DB file. So we've got to create that directory. In general, you'd be putting this out on a SAN somewhere and all that. But again, just to get started, let's go ahead and create that SQL DB files directory. So under the C drive, I'm just going to create a new folder, SQL, and a new folder on that, DB files. Alright, so we've got that C: SQL DB files, and now we're going to run the one script that does this all. And the way we're going to do it, so we open up a command prompt, and we're going to run the OSQL command using that system administrator user with the blank password which we just created, and we're going to run this one program, SQL Server DS2 create all small.sql, which happens to be in this directory. And this will go ahead and do all the things I just mentioned, create all the databases, all the tables, populate them, and it's done. That was in real time, and I had not tested that before. We can check and see if that worked by going OSQL -USA -P, use DS2, select count star from products, and there's our 10,000 products. Okay, so we've successfully installed the SQL Server DVD stored database on this SQL machine. Now we're going to flip over to another machine that we call DS2 driver and run the driver program from there. So all I've installed so far on DS2 driver is the SQL client connectivity. We bring up a command prompt, and you can see I can run the same command with just one other parameter, the S parameter, pointing to the server where SQL Server resides, DS2-SQL1, and I can run the same select count star from products command against the DS2 database and get the same result. So we've demonstrated that we have the connectivity. I've already gone ahead and downloaded the tarballs and unzipped them like I did over on the database machine. As you can see, there's our SQL Server DS2 directory. As I showed you a little earlier, it's got this program called DS2 SQL Server driver.exe. That's all we need for this. Let's go in there and go to that directory. and run that program. Now, since we didn't put any parameters in there, it basically tells us a list of the things, the parameters we can use. This is also in the document that I pointed to earlier. But in this case, the most basic thing we need is just the target name, and that's that DS2 SQL1. Basically, whatever we used before in that OSQL statement should work here. So we're going to go ahead and put a load on this SQL Server DS2 database on that DS2-SQL1 machine. All right, here we go. Now it's running right now. You can see all the threads have connected. The default, there's only the one thread. I'll talk about these. Username already exists, and now you can see we've got the first set of results. That's our results after 10 seconds. It's showing us 1810. I'm going to stop it right now. Stopping the program is very, very complex operation. It's called Control-C, and you can see that the program prints out every 10 seconds statistics. For example, the overall number of complete transactions or orders was 1810 after 10 seconds, 3623. So this is counting, when it counts an order, it's counting the complete cycle of a user logging in and or creating a new user, searching for some random number of DVDs. You can search by title, by category, by actor, and that's all can be set by some of these parameters, although the default ones work just fine. And then finally, filling up a shopping cart full of DVDs to be ordered and going ahead and purchasing them. The statistics here, orders per minute. This is the response time in the last 100 orders, 7 milliseconds. Response time average over the course of that 10 seconds was 4 milliseconds. There's 39 rollbacks. Rollbacks are built into the database to simulate real world activity. Rollbacks occur when the stock level has dropped so low that the order can't be completed. But it also, there's triggers in the code to generate a replenishment process. The one thing that confuses a lot of people is this username blah 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 already exists. What we're doing here is we're trying to simulate what happens when you go to many of these different sites. You want to put in your username and it's already in use. So you've got to add like some digits at the end or something like that to your name to get a unique username. That's what's happening here. It's exactly what's expected. It happens at a certain specified percentage of new users. But since it's confusing, you can turn it off. And the way you turn it off is by adding one more parameter. Percentage of new users, new customers, equal to 0. By putting in that, it will prevent any new customers from being added to the database, so you won't see that error. So let's run it without that. Again, we can specify the number of threads, and let me talk to threads in a minute. And as you can see, that error message has gone away, and there's our results after 10 seconds. 1,946 orders have been completed in 10 seconds at an over 10,000 order per minute rate, and there's 20 seconds. Now let's I'm going to let this run for a minute or so just to point out something else. There's a warm-up time, which by default is 1 minute. Let me also point out that the runtime by default is 0, which means it'll run forever. And the number of threads is by default 1. All these things are specifiable. I also want to point out that the think time is 0 by default. Think time is time interjected between every order to simulate a real user having to stare and think about what the results of his searches were and then deciding which one he wants to order. That's all into think time. Okay, so we ran 60 seconds, and as I said earlier, the reset time was 1 minute, or the warm-up time was 1 minute. So what happened after 1 minute is that all the stats were reset back to 0. So now where the overall number of orders at 60 seconds was over 11,000. Now it's been set back to 1977, and now you can see it's increasing. So let me cut it right there. So again, just using the base default parameters, we were able to show that this database is there, it's working, it's actually generating pretty good results. Although remember, this is just a small 10 megabyte database. It's basically sitting in the memory on that SQL Server machine. The threads, let's talk about threads for a minute. Threads basically represent users, although in the case that we're running now, which we often use when running performance runs, by setting the think time to 0, you're basically having each thread be a super user, if you will, a user that's just sitting there and pounding out orders without any think time, without having to read the screen or anything like that. It's just sitting there pounding away. So that's why we refer to threads rather than users. If you were to put in a realistic think time, then you can think of the threads as the actual number of users that this database can support. Alright, so what we've done in the last 10 or 15 minutes, and by the way, this whole thing was recorded real time, is take you from nothing to having installed the SQL Server, having installed all the DS2 code on 2 different machines, having installed the SQL Server database DS2 store, DVD store, and then gone over to a second machine and started the driver program and showed that it all successfully works. Alright, I promised that I would mention some of the other features that VMware has introduced in this version. Working with Girish Kadki, we've added code to enable you to have any kind of custom sized database and automatically generate all the different load scripts and all that you need to drive that number, and it becomes a second parameter in the driver program. We can now drive multiple databases within a single driver program. This is very useful, for example, if you're doing tests with a lot of different VMs and you want to run them all within a single screen rather than having a lot of these little command prompts around. And there's been other improvements as well. So what we plan to do in follow-up videos is to dive into some more of those details around some of these new features, as well as demonstrate some of the features of Oracle and MySQL. Again, if there's any questions, please refer them to Todd Muirhead and myself, Dave Jaffe, and I'm also going to include a URL for any kind of questions and discussion of the DVD Store database test kit, and good luck with it. Thanks. Bye.